Hey friend, welcome to Healthy with Heather Brown. If you don't know where to start with balancing being healthy and loving the life you already have, I got you, friend. And yes, of course, we're still going to enjoy some Chick-fil-A. I'm here to come alongside you and encourage you to fall more in love with your creator, your spouse, your kids, and your own health journey. We'll talk about how to let your good things grow until they become daily habits, with the occasional dad joke and point of view from my Yankee hubby, Eric. Don't stress. Let's hop on this Hot Mess Express together. So join me, Heather Brown, as we unpack what it looks like to live a life well loved. Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Healthy with Heather Brown. I am so excited today to have Nicole joining me, and I cannot wait for you guys to talk all things what I call being on Shark Week. We're talking about periods, we're talking about Aunt Flo visiting, we're talking about hormones, whatever you want to call it. I love it. So welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Heather, for having me. I am dying laughing. I haven't heard the Shark Week and that euphemism in so long.
Well, here, bringing it to you. Actually, one of the ladies at Burn mentioned it to me the other day at my gym, and I was like, I like that. I'm taking it with me.
It's amazing.
Yes. So, Nicole, tell everybody a little bit about you, your full name, who you are, what you do, all the things.
Yes, absolutely. So my name's Nicole Jardim, and I am a women's health coach, and I have been doing this for a long time. And it started because of my own period problems that began when I was a teenager. I was kind of a hot mess as a teenager with like all kinds of heavy bleeding and irregular cycles. And I had such bad period pain. It was to the point where it really kept me home from school. And, I was leaking through my pajamas onto my sheets. Like it was just kind of a nightmare for the most part. And I know I'm not alone by any means
No,
after
I was
having,
with you. High
right?
school,
You
same
too?
problems. Yes. Like in the bed, writhing with pain. Terrible.
Yeah, excruciating. I know, right? And as if being a teenager is not basically traumatic enough, just throw that little gasoline on the fire. And
Literally.
yeah, right. And so for years, I kind of lived with this because my friends also kind of had problems too, but nothing, it didn't feel as though it was as bad as mine. But my mom kept saying that her periods were even worse. So I just thought, oh, okay, well, I have it better than her. So something changed. And she never really thought to take me to the doctor or anything because she just lived with it as well. Anyway, finally, fast forward, finally I go and see her gynecologist, and she immediately put me on the pill when I explained everything that was going on. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm part of the cool kids club now. I'm going to be on the pill. That's a big deal, quite a rite of passage, as you know, right? And that for me was amazing because I felt like I had found my period panacea. I was like, okay, great. I have a solution now, and I'm never coming off of this thing. And because suddenly my periods were no longer painful and I did not have irregular cycles anymore, everything came on time. It was so much lighter, which was a miracle. I could go to the beach, all of these things that obviously you just want to do as a teenager. Anyway, fast forward a few years and I started having major side effects and I didn't know what they were from. I saw so many different doctors. Nobody could really give me any answers. I mean, I remember seeing a gynecologist. I was in my early to mid 20s and she was just like, well, I could give you some estrogen because I was having painful sex. I was having all kinds of issues. And so she's like, I can give you this estrogen cream and that should sort it out. And I'm like, okay, I just don't feel like I should be on estrogen cream at 24 years old. This doesn't make any sense. So there was just so many issues like chronic yeast infections, UTIs. And then I finally ended up, it was a revolving door. And so finally I ended up in the ER because I had an allergic reaction to a UTI medication. And,
Oh
I
my
had
gosh, how traumatic.
so severe. I know, it was crazy. And so a friend of mine had been telling me to see her acupuncturist for a really long time. And so the next day she was like, okay, are you going to see my acupuncturist now? Or are you going to continue doing this? So I went and saw her acupuncturist, and that was the catalyst that changed everything. He was the one who, for the first time ever, after seeing so many doctors, pointed out that the pill could be part of the problem. And I had never, ever heard this perspective before. And it blew the doors off of all my beliefs about how women's bodies work. right off. And that was it. And that was really what put me on this path to do this work. And, I could go on, but I'll stop there. But basically I ended up studying to do, to be a women's health coach, and doing a lot more training around this because I really fundamentally finally understood how this all works.
Wow. Yeah. And it's so crazy that you say that because I remember as a teenager, just being like, I just need anything to help me to not miss school and to like, just have a quote unquote normal teenage life, whatever that means.
Yes.
And yeah, exactly. But I remember in college, even my mom and one of her girlfriends, and her girlfriend had had cancer. I can't remember if it was breast or ovarian now. And then my mom also has had an endometrial cancer. And so both of them like took me to lunch and they were like, listen, we really want to talk with you about you being on birth control. You've now been on it for several years. We're starting to wonder, what's going on with our bodies. And like, we're hearing and learning all these things because we have had cancer or are like looking down that path. And so we just want to caution you that you might want to research it a little bit more. And of course, being in college, I was like, I'm busy. I don't have time for that. This is ridiculous. I mean, I've talked to my doctor. My doctor would never put me on anything that would harm me. Why would he do that? There's so much research. They said it's low dose. Like I had all those excuses in my mind. And now looking back at that, 12 years later, I'm like, oh my gosh, they were right. Your mama's always right. Why is that?
The fact that they had that insight and they came and spoke to you about it is remarkable. That's amazing to have that experience and to be able to put those pieces together, down the line when we figure it out for ourselves, right? We get over ourselves in our 20s and 30s finally.
Finally.
From our
Yes.
teenage years. Yeah, exactly. We're willing to take advice. So yeah, that's amazing though that
Well,
they had
thank
that
you.
insight.
Yes, I know. I know. And in hindsight, I'm like, gosh, I wish that someone would have told me that sooner. And almost, I even wish it wouldn't have been my mom because you know how in college you're like, well, I'll listen to anybody but my parents. Are just so silly. But it is how it is. So I know you wrote a book called Fix Your Period. Can you share with us a little bit about that, Nicole?
Yes, yes, it was quite a labor of love. I wrote it, and the reason I wrote it really was because for obviously so many years I've had so many women coming to me who are just desperate for like a step-by-step protocol, some sort of understanding first of all of what the heck is going on in their bodies and then what do they do. And so that was the perspective I came from with this book. I really wanted to be educating everyone who wants to understand what's going on with periods and their bodies, and then also offering solutions that make sense that are tangible. And so that was what this book was born out of, and it has been really incredible to see the feedback from it and hear the feedback from it because women are just like, I read your book in 3 days. And I,
Wow.
literally read your book in 3 days, devoured it because I was completely blown away. Every single page just blew my mind. And that is exactly the feedback I wanted to hear. So, yeah, it was really very much about educating so that you're empowered to make more educated and informed decisions about your body and not constantly be living in fear of what's going on inside of you.
100%. And Nicole, I need to read your book because I at this moment that I landed on your Instagram page, I was just voraciously like intaking as much as I could and just like, yes, all these things that I've thought like she has like talked about it and from the scientific standpoint and from also just like a personal standpoint. So do you mind even just giving us like a Cliff's Note version of women are listening to this? What can they do to fix their period? What does that look like?
Oh my gosh, I know. It's so funny. I did have an Instagram post once about like what we think fixes our periods, and I wrote the pill underneath, and then I wrote what actually fixes our periods, and then there was a whole list. And so I think the first thing that is so critically important for all of us is to understand your cycle, to really like to start tracking your cycle, to start tracking the symptoms that you're experiencing throughout the month so that you know when those things are showing up. And then you can kind of figure out what is triggering them because there are sort of long-term triggers and short-term triggers. And what I mean by that is the long-term things are sort of like the chronic habits and the chronic health issues that we may have that are potentially triggering symptoms pretty much every month. And then there are the short-term things that are happening within that week or within that day that are triggering symptoms to show up. Like, you might have eaten too much sugar and then you get a migraine, or, you get like that month you get like really bad ovulatory pain or really bad period pain because you were super stressed or something like that. So it's really important for us to kind of figure out what's going on there so that we're not just feeling around in the dark, trying to figure this stuff out, because I think that that's one of the biggest issues, is that we just don't know. And then when we are coming from a place of not knowing, we're just confused and frustrated and freaked out. And so that's really what I laid out in the first few chapters of the book. I'm like explaining exactly what's happening in your body, why ovulation is so important, why your period is just a reflection of your overall health. And so what I really love to do is to start with cycle tracking, again, like tracking your basal body temperature, tracking your cervical fluid changes. That's, that I feel is like sort of step 2 of cycle tracking, but the first step is to really track your symptoms, how long your period is, how much you're bleeding, when you're ovulating, if you think you're ovulating, any of symptoms like headaches and pain and moodiness, all of those kinds of things. And then from there, and again, that's not necessarily like the absolute first thing you have to do, because you can make changes without doing that as well. But I like for people to understand things. So then from there, I have everyone pretty much start with their diet. What are you eating? What exactly is going into your mouth that is causing you to have all these symptoms? Because what I want everyone to understand is that, like I said before, your period is a reflection of your overall health. It is a barometer of what's going on internally, what's going on in your body internally, and what's going on externally in your environment. And so when you start to view your period that way, then you can start to see that, okay, my period's not just my period. It is actually just responding to all these external and internal stimuli. And so we start with food, and then we work on, not only what you're eating, but how you're eating it. Are you running out the door, scarfing down breakfast? Or are you drinking a gallon of coffee before you've even eaten anything first thing in the morning? What exactly is happening in your life? And so we really examine all of that. And then from there, we go into other things too. Like we're looking at the external and internal stressors, what's happening in your work, in your personal life, in your relationships, what's happening internally. Like, is there gut dysbiosis? Is there something going on with your gut that's triggering an inflammatory response that's then causing pain and other symptoms? So we look at your stress, we look at your gut health, how your liver is functioning. Your liver detoxes hormones. So it basically breaks hormones down, and then you poop them out essentially once you're done with using them. And we also look at your thyroid, because your thyroid definitely is communicating with your ovaries. So there's a whole conversation there too. And it's often really overlooked. And then we also look at, as well, really finally at, how do you live more in tandem with your cycle? How do you live in sync with your cycle, which I know was one of the things you wanted to chat about too. So it's multifaceted.
Oh, absolutely. And when you're talking about all this, do you typically have a way that you tell women that you advise them to track it? For instance, is there an app you recommend, or do you think they just get a journal? And what types of things are you looking for them to write down daily? For instance, like let's say they're like, oh, it's not Shark Week for me. Like I'll figure this out and re-listen to this episode maybe then. But what could they do now to figure out what, phase of the cycle they're in? That'll be my first question. I'm like, I have so many.
Yeah, so many, right? I know there's so many things. Okay, so the phases of the cycle, I'll just break that down really quickly for everyone so they understand it. So Shark Week is phase 1.
Sure
I couldn't
enough.
resist, right? And so that's phase 1. And so that whole phase is known as the follicular phase. And it's when your follicles are basically getting ready on your ovaries, at where one of them is going to ovulate and release an egg, essentially. And so that's why they call it the follicular phase. So those follicles are getting ready. So the first half of that is the bleeding phase, AKA Shark Week. And then the rest of the follicular phase up to ovulation, I call it the non-bleeding phase. So you kind of break it up into 2. And then you go into that ovulatory phase. And then after ovulation occurs, then we have the luteal phase, which is the final portion of your entire monthly cycle. And so what's really interesting about that first half of your cycle is estrogen and testosterone are rising, and then they peak at ovulation. So you have these amazing juicy hormones that are like giving you so much energy. It's changing your personality. You're feeling more outgoing. You're starting to feel like you can take on the world. It's a great time to do, life and business things out in the world. And your sex drive is getting better. Like it's slowly heightening throughout that part of the cycle. And so what you'll find is that during this time, on a physical level, like I said, you're feeling your energy shifts and you're feeling your mood shifts, and you feel more confident and you definitely feel more attractive. Estrogen has that effect on your skin and your hair, which is really nice. And you're also feeling more outgoing thanks to that testosterone as well. And so what you'll notice physically is that your cervical fluid changes. So I really ask women to start to pay attention to that, right? Because we've heard like, oh yeah, that's just discharge. Doesn't mean anything, but it really does. And so what happens is after your period, what you'll notice is like there's a dry feeling, physically, like you'll notice your vulva just feels kind of dry. And then what you'll notice is it starts to get wetter and wetter. And this is typically in your teens, 20s, and 30s, and maybe some people in their 40s too, but that changes as you get into perimenopause. But what then happens is you get wetter and wetter consistency cervical fluid. And so it starts to take on this wetter, creamier, stretchier consistency. And then as you approach ovulation, you'll notice that like you have peak cervical fluid. So you'll notice quite a bit of it. And you'll notice it's definitely takes on that very wet, watery, stretchy kind of consistency. And so then after ovulation happens, the egg is released, and then the little follicle on your ovary starts to produce progesterone, which takes over the second half of the cycle. Progesterone, unlike estrogen and testosterone, changes your cervical fluid to this sticky, drier, tackier kind of sensation. So you don't see that wet consistency anymore. So that's one of the most amazing ways for us to know that we've ovulated, because there's a distinct change in our cervical fluid patterns. So that's one thing.
Okay,
like
mind blown. Sorry, I'm just
Isn't
like
that crazy?
Didn't know that. Okay, interesting.
Isn't it so cool? I know.
It
And
is.
so what you'll notice is that it might dry up for some of us, or it might just get that, like I said, stickier, tackier consistency. And then as you proceed through the luteal phase, just like a week before you get your period, you might notice that it gets a little wetter again. And then people are like, oh my God, did I ovulate again? What the hell happened? And it's actually not that. It's just that estrogen rises as sort of like a preparation for pregnancy, because our bodies are always trying to get pregnant.
Oh, sure.
We might not be, but they are. So yeah, so estrogen rises. So you'll notice a bit of a change, but then that usually dissipates, and then you kind of dry up again, and then you get your period. So it's remarkable, these changes, and it's so cool to see it. And what's even cooler is that during ovulation, your cervix actually rises. So your cervix is the one producing all this fluid, and it rises up so that the sperm can, first of all, so your body can get the strongest sperm. So it has to swim farther. So the weak ones can't make it. But once they get to the cervix, it's like a little den for them, and they can rest, and then they can keep going to the egg that's in the fallopian tube. It's kind of amazing.
It really is. I talked about this, I feel like every episode, but God's design is mind blowing to me. I'm like, the fact that he made it where the strongest swimmers get up there, like all of it is just like, what? Like it's just crazy. It's crazy.
It's incredible. I know. We're not playing around with our female bodies.
No, we are not.
We're not. And the egg actually chooses the sperm too. So that's kind of like a relatively new bit of information that's come out, that the egg is the one that's really like feeling for the right sperm. Yeah, because not all of the sperm that make it get into the egg, right? So it chooses the one it wants. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That is super cool. So
Yeah.
when you talked about each of those phases, I've just started to research this myself. I actually went to a LTK conference, and it was 300 women in this room. And of course, I have to have that time of the month during that week. So my energy, is lower. And because I'm starting to learn about this, I was like, this just stinks at this conference and lining up with my like high energy self. You know what I mean? One of the most popular questions I hear is, how do you do it all? Or can I pick your brain? And I always laugh because my knee-jerk reaction is, oh girl, I don't do it all. And now I have a way to let you pick my brain about my business. I have an incredible team of women helping me manage my crazy behind the scenes and keeping My Life Well Loved and this podcast running smoothly. Because Lord knows I'd be a hot mess express trying to do it all myself. This year, I launched a course where I finally do a deep dive and share all the raw details about how I built my business and team to where it is today. My COO, Alyssa, and I recorded over 2 hours of video into 9 lessons to create a course that reviewers are saying is unlike anything else out there. Hey, their words, not mine. But hold on, the videos aren't all. I'm going to read you my list of what it includes so I don't forget any of it. There's a 28-page workbook with questions to move you from stuck as a solopreneur to thriving as a team, or even just hiring your first assistant. with smart goals and steps to guide you from point A to point B efficiently. A behind the scenes look at our application, hiring process, and critical onboarding process, my cannot miss first step in hiring a new employee, and how to cultivate a team buy-in. There's a deep dive on my team's inner workings, our operating systems, favorite apps, and index full of time-saving tools we use to keep our team running smoothly. If you're ready to take your business, side hustle, or network marketing lifestyle to the next level and grow a team, I'm your girl. Head to www.mylifewellloved.com/team to grab yours today. But are there any things that you would say that you try to advise women from a workout standpoint, from what they're eating? I know what you said about, obviously, like, you do have the higher energy and like there's better times to rest. So can you kind of talk us through how you do that? And then how do you marry when like life doesn't line up with what your body's in sync for?
Yeah, I know, right? Life is a little challenging when it comes to cycle syncing. And so I think the first thing is to always say or preface this by saying that life is always not going to line up. And so I think it's so important for us to take care of ourselves in the down times of our cycles. And and when we have control over something like meetings or events or whatever, going out to parties or whatever, we should definitely take control of that and cancel things if we need to during those down times of the cycle, like during our period and then right in the lead up to our periods, 3 to 5 days beforehand. Typically I don't do podcast interviews right before my period because I definitely can't even string a sentence together. It's kind of funny. And during my period too, try to take some time. And so I think for some of us, we really do have control over that, which is great. And I know for others, it's not so easy. So I recognize that too. And I don't want to make anyone feel bad or left out because they feel like they don't have too much control over these kinds of situations. But what I will say is that maximizing that time between the end of your period and probably like a few days, maybe even up to a week after ovulation, because I'm like almost a week after ovulation right now and I'm still feeling the ovulatory fire a little bit. So I feel like and it's so individual for us, and I think the more you start to pay attention, the more you'll see. So you start tracking on an app, like you were saying earlier. What do you track on? I typically recommend an app, and then you can really start to see where you're at in your cycle. And so I would say that, again, like focusing on downtime, on self-care, on self-preservation during your period particularly is going to feel so amazing because your body is, first of all, going to recognize it, and you're going to have so much more energy and feel like you have a lot more output in the 2 weeks that follow your period, even 2.5 to 3 weeks possibly.
Wow.
So with that said, yeah, you can, and I think that the eating for your cycle can be a little challenging. It can feel for some people like it's just another thing I have to figure out. Right? I know.
Yes.
So I want to be cognizant of that. And so what I typically recommend is to really focus on like blood sugar balancing. And we can totally get into all of that too, but stabilizing your blood sugar with your meals versus, like changing up your meals completely for every phase of your cycle. And so what's really interesting is that when estrogen is dominant in the first half of your cycle, your blood sugar tends to be more stable because estrogen makes us more insulin sensitive. So it means that we just respond better to insulin, our bodies do. And so with that said, you can tend to have more carbohydrates during that time. And it's the time where I'm like, eat the cookies if you want to eat the cookies, but try to eat the protein before you eat the cookies. Kind of thing. Be responsible with the cookies. But that really is the time where you're not going to feel it so much, like physically and emotionally. And then when progesterone takes over, progesterone has this blood sugar lowering effect on the body, which is great. But if you spike your blood sugar too high, it'll crash quicker. And so I joked in my book, like, are you just hangry or are you PMSing? And so it's really funny because a lot of women have come back to me and said, wow, as soon as I started to stabilize my blood sugar, meaning that I was eating protein and fat and carbs all together at meals and in snacks, I found that my crazy mood symptoms in the second half of my cycle pretty much dissipated or, went away completely. So it
That's
is,
huge.
yeah,
And
huge, right?
and
We have a lot of
Nicole,
control over
we
this.
yes, we do. And Nicole, we actually just did a podcast episode. It was episode 14, so I'll link to it in the show notes with Kelly LeBeck, and she talked a lot about balancing your food and what that looks like and specific foods she recommends and great protein. So I will link back to that as a great resource for you guys. But also in just the way that I have been living since I had my 4-year-old, that is so top of mind for me now because I'm like, if I can get that protein 20 to 30 grams every meal, you literally feel like a new human. I mean, you have so much more energy no matter what phase of your cycle you're on. I mean, it's a game changer to get that protein in. So
I'm right there with you. Could not agree with you more. I know it truly is. It really is, especially in our society because we live in an environment that I think is not totally congruent with our biology for females, particularly. And that's a real challenge, right? It's a very male dominated society where the systems are all set up according to male biology. And so that's a huge issue, especially for our female biology where we're cyclical rather than daily like the men are. And so we have to really do a little bit harder work to exist in an environment or at least thrive in an environment that isn't really designed around our biology. And so I think that that's so important for us to remember that stress, particularly that chronic psychological stress, has such an impact on our cycles and our blood sugar. And so when stress is high, it causes the release of glucose into the bloodstream. And so it totally dysregulates our blood sugar. So it's really even more important about the protein side of things too.
yes, absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about hormones. Do you mind just sharing a little bit because you've been talking about how, progesterone and things ebb and flow during your cycle, but what is one thing that you've been surprised to realize most of us as women probably don't know about our bodies? And maybe it is specifically related to hormones, and maybe it's something slightly different.
It's definitely related to hormones.
Okay,
And you
perfect.
know what it is, and I was completely surprised too. I didn't even understand it. Was ovulation being a vital bodily function for anyone of childbearing age, and that we need to experience ovulation regularly, whether we aspire to be pregnant or not. And the reason I say that is because ovulation that's occurring on a consistent basis is basically the driver for sufficient levels of the estradiol or the estrogen that I just mentioned. Estradiol is a prominent type of estrogen in our bodies in the childbearing years, and progesterone, which I also mentioned. And progesterone is super super low in the first half of the cycle because your that little follicle that I mentioned on the ovary actually produces progesterone once the egg has been released. And what's incredible about our bodies is that that little follicle turns into something called a corpus luteum. So the egg is released, it survives for about 24 hours or so, 12 to 24 hours. It's either fertilized or it's not, and it just disintegrates. It's just one cell thick. And so what happens is that little corpus luteum on the ovary can grow. It's a mini endocrine gland that we make every single cycle. It can grow from it can be between 3 and 5 inches, which if you're looking at the screen, that's pretty large. It takes
That
over the whole
is what?
ovary.
Oh
Yeah,
my
it's
word.
crazy. It takes over the whole ovary, and that pumps out progesterone. And so if we don't have ovulation, we literally make almost zero progesterone. Our adrenals produce some progesterone, but really we don't make a lot. So we need this ovulation to happen on a consistent basis, not only for that rise in estrogen and testosterone that comes right before ovulation, but then for us to actually produce progesterone at sufficient levels to maintain overall health. And I think one of the other big misconceptions as it relates to ovulation and our hormones is that we think that estrogen and progesterone are just for baby making. And that's not the case. So when we don't have ovulation happening on a consistent basis, our brain health and our cognitive function really suffer. Our sleep regulation goes haywire. We start to lose bone density. This is why there's research showing that teenagers put on the pill at a really young age actually have bone density issues. So that shows up there. This is why
What?
yes, girl, I'm telling you, like heart disease, breast disease, like breast and uterine health, cancers of both of those are, these hormones are protective of all of this. Vaginal health. This is why when you're on the pill, you tend to get a lot of vaginal, like infections type things. So bacterial vaginosis or yeast infections. It's partially because we lose all the estrogen that's in our bodies, and it's basically supplanted by the synthetic estrogen in the pill, but pills are low dose, so that could be problematic. And so a lot of the time, girls and women will have these chronic infections, and it's because estrogen actually supports vaginal microbiome diversity. And I could go on. Your skin, your hair, like estrogen supports thickness of your skin and firmness and elasticity and hair follicle health. So I lost so much hair on the pill. It was crazy. So there's so many parts to this that we don't even know about. And then we're just, a pill is just slapped on us for regular cycles when we're teenagers, and we don't even realize the potential long-term implications.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so we're actually taking this pill because our doctor recommends it, and we think it's convenient and it's good for right that moment. But then all of a sudden, you're like toying with your health for years to come. It sounds like potentially depression and anxiety have a greater chance to take root. So, and then we wonder like, oh, why am I having all these issues? But it's like, well, it really could be stemming from years of not having a regular cycle that your body was meant to do.
100%. And so here's a great example for you, if that's okay to share,
Do
because
yeah.
I feel like this is something that people can really relate to. And I'm curious, you should think back if you're listening to what your experience was like when you went on the pill, if you can remember. So a friend of mine, she's a colleague, her daughter just went to college, and she was trying to decide what to do for birth control. And against her better judgment, she decided that she was going to take the pill. And so she put her daughter on the pill, and she's never been on anything like this before. She's 18. And so she went, and within a month had strep throat and doesn't get stuff like this. So she had strep throat, and she's like, okay. So she goes to the urgent care. She ends up getting antibiotics, and then develops a yeast infection, because typically antibiotics might do that because they wipe out all the good bacteria, not only in your gut, but vaginal microbiome stuff too. And then she says, like, then there's like a cascade of things that starts to happen. There's a UTI that she gets. And again, her daughter has never had any of this stuff before. And then she gets sick again. And so now she has a cold, and she feels like her immune system is shot. And now she's not sleeping properly. And just the description, the way she described all of these problems starting to happen, it sounded so much like my own experience as well, because suddenly my immune system just went haywire as a teenager in college, and I got mono, and I felt like I couldn't recover from it. And then I started having all these series of problems that just seemed so strange and so out of the blue, and again, no one really could put the pieces together, and her daughter sounded so similar to mine. So it's really important for us to pay attention to that, because the pill really does impact so much. Those It's not only the loss of your own hormones that are very different to the synthetic hormones, but then there's side effects from the synthetic hormones individually as well. So we really have to be, again, I think, paying attention to our health, right? These things are not just happening randomly, they are happening for a reason.
Well, and I think that that goes back to so much of everything that I have been researching. I've really started to deep dive into health ever since 2020. I've been a fitness instructor for 10 years, but after 2020 happened, I was like, okay, I feel like this really opened up my eyes to a lot of things that maybe just pharmaceutical companies or whatever are just pushing on you. And so I'm really starting to like, okay, I've got to go back to ground zero and like really start paying attention to what my body is telling me. And instead of just being like, oh, I just got sick. Oh, I just got sick. Oh, this just happened. It's like, no, no, no. Let's like actually take stock of what our body's telling us. And I do want to give a practical example of, so a lot of and I've talked before, and I can link back to the show notes of this episode as well. But I talk a lot about burn boot camp, and it's a high intensity workout. You do a leg day and arm day every week. You do lots of cardio. However, on the week that I am, Aunt Flo has come to visit, then I just feel like I have no energy. I mean, I'm going to go, but I guess I'm just going to, in my brain, tell myself I'm only going to do it, halfway. I'm just not going to kill myself out there. But as I've been learning more about the cycles thinking, I'm like, no, I have control of whether I go to burn or not. And if today it's not a right fit for me, instead, I'm just going to walk, or I'm just going to teach myself a Pure Barre class at home. And so I think just taking those little tweaks and changes, though, they add up so much. So when you hear us talking about like, you should do this and that and the other, it's like in an ideal world, like you were saying, yes, but tiny steps make a huge impact. So don't be afraid to just start small. And even if you just start journaling today, how you feel. Okay, well, that's a great start.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, I love this so much. I agree completely that it is small steps and it is just maybe saying no to that invitation. Even though your head is a yes, your body is probably like, "No girl, I really need to stay home." I think that's really what we need to start to pay attention to, right? It's your body's wisdom, it's your body's intuition. I feel like especially for girls at a young age, our intuition is turned off because we're sick when we're kids, we're taken to the doctor's gonna quote unquote fix us, and then we get better and then we keep going. But like as we get older and these health problems become more chronic, there aren't a lot of solutions in traditional medicine, and that's not to bash them. I just had my appendix removed. I love modern medicine truly,
Oh,
but
hey, we're twins. I'm also missing an appendix.
oh my god, look at that.
Look at us.
That was quite a shocking experience, but thank God for good medical care. I
Amen.
really, yes, I'm just very glad for that. But I just feel like the problem is that we're not looking at the chronic disease side of things in a way that is offering solutions that are sustainable. And so that's really what I want for everybody is to start to tune back into your wisdom, your intuition about when something feels right or doesn't feel right, and don't second guess it because the body just doesn't lie.
Amen,
It
sister.
really doesn't.
I actually was talking with Dr. Will Cole, who's a functional specialist, and I'll link back to that episode too. But he said a lot of the problem for women in general, because we're obviously talking about women, is that you will go get blood work done at a traditional doctor, though, and they'll be like, I'm sorry, you fall in a normal range, you're fine. But he was like, is the average American healthy?
Right. And
No,
that's
they're
what the
not.
normal ranges
And
are based on.
exactly. So he was like, that's why I highly encourage women, don't ignore your body. Always listen to your body. Even if it's in the normal range of unhealthy Americans, do like do something else about it. Your body is not going to lie to you. So, anyway.
Totally. Yeah, no, he's so right. Dr. Sean Tassone, he's an integrative OBGYN who I'm friends with. And he also says that he's like, if they're going to say to you that there's nothing wrong with you when based on test results, when you're clearly showing symptoms, that's kind of just lazy medicine because it means that you're not willing to dig a little bit deeper to figure out what the actual problem is. And that's a huge issue. And so, I mean, that's why there's just a huge industry of people like us who are willing to dig a little bit deeper.
Absolutely. And don't worry, I will link all of Nicole's Instagram and her website and all the things in the show notes because I know so many women are going to be like, I got to talk to Nicole like today. But I know we're running short on time. So I want to quickly ask you the next question, which is I had never heard of the term perimenopause until the last probably 2 years. And I assume that I'm approaching that window. Can you explain to women what perimenopause is and how to most gracefully go into it, I guess?
Oh my gosh, perimenopause. I know. First of all, how old are you if you don't mind me asking?
This episode I think comes out in November, so I turned 37 in November.
Okay, all right. So like you're kind of getting into the window, but don't worry. You got time. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, you've got time. Okay, so I would say that the first thing that I typically hear is that perimenopause is this terrifying time when all hell will break loose in our bodies and we're just going to be, yeah, just everything is going to be terrible for a whole decade. And I kind of reject that, I have to say, because I feel like we have to really start to reimagine and re-envision what our lives will look like in that decade and beyond, because there's such a stigma around aging to begin with, particularly for women. We really have to change things up, ladies. Like, this is not okay. And so, with that said, perimenopause, I think, just adds this other layer of dread, I suppose you could say. So, what is typically happening? And for as of right now, the science hasn't figured out how to reverse this. So it's inevitable that this is going to happen. And it's a good thing. Trust me, I'll explain. But essentially, what is happening is your ovaries are slowly shutting down. They are no longer going to be creating viable eggs that could be, available for pregnancy type of thing. And so things just start to slow down. And so, what typically will happen is women tend to notice that somewhere between the ages of 35 and maybe like 42, you might notice that things sputter a little bit. So, you might have one or two anovulatory cycles, something along those lines, like a year. And then, it progresses from there. What I will say is that dietary and lifestyle changes play a humongous role in this, at least in your 30s and into your early 40s. So, there's a lot you can do to prolong that process. And it's not necessarily necessarily the case for everyone, but I really feel that way, that I've seen massive changes in someone who's 38, who's been told they're just going into perimenopause and there's nothing they can do. I'm like, no, 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 there's plenty you can do. So I
False.
just want, right? I just want to say that to you, that if there's something going on, there's lots you can do. So with that said, so what's happening here is, right, so ovulation is changing, sex hormone production is starting to sputter, like I said. So sometimes what we end up see happening is progesterone is dropping, right? So if you don't ovulate, like I said, you don't produce that progesterone. And so what will happen is you end up in this, what they call estrogen dominant situation, which basically just means estrogen is dominant over progesterone, relatively speaking. And so with that said, you start to notice things like heavier periods or flooding, which is like just, I mean, I don't know if they even need to explain flooding, right?
We got it.
Yeah. A lot of bleeding. And then like an irregular period pattern, right? So you might have a really heavy long period 1 month, and then 2 months later, you might have a short and light period, and it's super annoying and frustrating. And what you might also notice is things like irregular bleeding or spotting. So different times of the cycle, you just notice that you're bleeding and you're not entirely sure why. And then some of women will just notice that they skip periods altogether in this perimenopause phase. So there's multiple things going on with your period. And then sadly, there's also things going on physically as well, because as I said, right, those hormones literally affect everything. So you might notice hot flashes or night sweats, particularly in the lead up to your period when estrogen and progesterone are dropping down a lot. And then sleep issues. So having a little bit of a harder time getting to sleep. And this I've noticed in my early 40s. I started to notice it about a year ago, and I just turned 43. So I feel like, these things start to show up then. And I think a big part of that, like I said, is really trying to do your best to take care of your health in any way you can. And then there's like migraines and headaches and maybe heightened premenstrual symptoms or mood changes and vaginal dryness. Like those are some of the bigger ones that I feel are worth mentioning. Not so fun, but thankfully we live in 2022 where there are lots of solutions. So there's that. So that's kind of what's going on.
I heard this recently, and I'm curious your take on it, that as Americans, we are so inside that a lot of times we're actually just missing the beneficial properties of being outside in the sunlight. And I was hearing that it can help regulate your hormones if you try to get outside every day, preferably, been told, around noon to get like the best sunlight, but then also to help with your circadian rhythms of sleep in the morning and at night in the natural sunlight. Is there any truth to that in your opinion?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Please go outside. But yeah. I mean, we're animals technically, right? I know we don't think of ourselves as that, but technically we are. We're mammals. And so we really should be outside. We should be in the sunlight. We should be avoiding artificial light as much as we possibly can. I recognize that's not the case for everyone, but getting sunlight to stabilize your circadian rhythm so that you're awake in the daytime and sleepy at night and not the other way around, which is the problem for so many of us, is so key. And so there's this thing called the cortisol awakening response. And so what that is when you wake up, your cortisol shoots up to get you out of bed and get you energized and get you going. And so many of us have dysfunctional cortisol awakening responses because of our exposure to artificial light. Not only our unexposure to the sun, but also the exposure to the screens. I mean, I have two screens in front of me right now. It's terrible. So I understand. And a light. It's ridiculous. So I will say that cortisol awakening response can be helped tremendously if you get light in your eyes first thing in the morning. So opening your window, going and standing outside. I know it's going to be winter soon, so that's going to suck for some of us, but just opening a window if you can, standing with the light on your face, just for like a few minutes if you can, or 5 to 10 minutes, even better. And what's even more important too is to try and get the sunlight at different times of the day, right? So the morning sunlight, the midday, the afternoon, the evening sunlight. So not evening, but you know what I mean? The sunset sunlight, because those are different, spectrums of light that will be really helpful for that cortisol awakening response. And cortisol really influences the rest of your hormones. So you want to start there. I feel like that's a big one.
Yes, for sure. Well, Nicole, I'm so glad that you joined us today. And I have one final question that I ask every guest that comes on the show. And that is, what's your favorite thing in your health journey that's making you feel like yourself right now?
Oh my gosh. Oh, there's so many things. That's so hard. Honestly, as I mentioned before, I feel like sleep, it's funny, in your 20s, you don't even really think so much about sleep. Nobody ever told me anything about sleep being important. Yeah. So I was like, whatever, I'll sleep whenever. And now it feels so critically important as I've gotten older and I don't have children. So I can only imagine how you guys feel. It's like, yeah, we told you so. But it really has been one of those things where I have a whole new appreciation for it. And getting good quality sleep is so
Yes.
huge. And I found that the Aura Ring has been tremendously helpful for me in that journey, just trying to figure out how much I'm getting, if I'm getting good stuff, good sleep, and like also going to bed. So it's been a big challenge in my life to go to bed earlier. So that, I know it's so silly, but it's also so crucial to our health. So that's been my big
Yes.
one really
That's
for the last
awesome.
year. Yeah.
That's a really good answer. I fully support that answer. I'm like, amen. Everybody needs some good sleep.
You've got a 4-year-old. I'm sure you know.
Yes, I do. But anyway, Nicole, tell them where they can find you online, any other resources you might have available you want to point them to, and I'll make sure and put them in the show notes.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me, Heather. This has been so great. So you can find me at NicoleJardim.com. My blog is on there. I have a bunch of information on there. I have my courses on there as well. I have a membership coming soon too. I also am on Instagram, Nicole M. Jardim. I'm like Madeline. And so I'm on there and I spend a lot of time on there. I'm also sadly on TikTok too. Too old for that
I feel
stuff.
the same way. Oh,
Right.
Lord.
Oh my gosh. I'm way too old, but I'm on there for anyone, the cool kids. And then you can, send us a message or find me on Instagram and let me know what's going on with your health.
Well, Nicole, I actually think it's really good that you're on TikTok, even though you're begrudging like me. I don't want to be on there either. But especially with information that you're putting out there, I think it's so important for these high school and college kids to be able to find the resources about what they can do to help with their periods and that they don't have to get on the pill. There's other solutions. So I'm thankful that you're willing to put yourself out there where you're uncomfortable for the betterment of everybody else.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. I will say too, I have a book, like you said, Fix Your Period, which is sold everywhere. So everyone can grab that. That's an easy way to access all of my work.
Amazing. Well, thanks again, Nicole. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today. It's always a blast to be here with you guys and to bring you people that are a lot smarter than me and know all the things to help you guys along on your fitness journey. And I'm just here learning with you. So make sure that you shoot me a DM on @HealthyWithHeatherBrown on Instagram. And I can't wait to hear what you learned from this lesson or from this episode. So make sure to screenshot it, share it on your social media, and tag me and Nicole. We can't wait to see what you have to say. Have a great day. If y'all think I'm a little crazy, just wait till my favorite guest joins me in the Marriage Corner. It's my hubby, Eric. Guys, we're taking a deep dive today. I'm super excited to talk all the things marriage, but not just like, sometimes I have Eric bring in some fun questions, but today I was like, let's take it a little deeper. So Eric, what'd you bring us with a good deep question today?
Well, I do want to welcome everybody once again back to the Marriage Corner. Now, we record these at different times during the day, and we're actually recording tonight, so I kind of like to refer to this Marriage Corner as the Marriage Corner After Dark.
Yes, I love it.
So who knows where this Marriage Corner will go, but...
True, I'm like, when this one's 45 minutes long, don't be surprised. It goes a little longer.
We'll see what happens.
But,
like you mentioned, some of the questions that I typically ask are more fun, just random. I love to hear your random thoughts on all different topics. But this one's a little bit more serious, I would say, and it's one thing that I have been thinking about. And the question is, how important is it to you to fight for your marriage or relationship? Or how would you interpret that phrase, to fight for your marriage? What does that mean to you?
So I really like this question because I feel like you can take it lots of different ways. And it actually makes me think of one of my dear friends, Andrea, who, as she was first getting to know Eric and I, in the first, I would say, like, year and a half of us becoming friends, she said, I obviously don't know Eric that well, but what you say about him and what I know about your personality, she was like, I'm just going to be honest, you're both very outgoing and maybe opinionated would be the word that I'm looking for. And she literally said, so how does that work? And I was like, well, I guess that's a good question. So I think that to me, to fight for your marriage can mean different things to different people. But for us, I think it's being willing to get uncomfortable, to push each other outside of our comfort zones, and to also have each other's best interests at heart, though. So I think that for me, fighting for our marriage sometimes means, I may be really busy or really like caught up in different things, but I'm still going to like push my boundaries to get out on that date night, or to like bring up a question even when I'm tired, but to truly like fight tooth and nail to get babysitters lined up and to go out of town on a trip once a year. All those things to me involve a little like fight and extra spirit.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said about wanting to fight for your marriage. And, I think when I think about fighting for a marriage, I agree with you. Getting out of your comfort zone and having those difficult conversations, to me, is what fighting for your marriage is. You can't be afraid to be honest to your spouse or whoever you're in a relationship with and bring up those difficult conversations. A lot of times people are afraid to bring up those difficult conversations because they're afraid of the responses or the answers they will get. They may not be the answers they want, but I find a lot of times when we have our difficult conversations, if we're able to work through them, and like we've mentioned before, as long as you want what is best for me in our relationship and I want what is best for you, we're looking out for each other, then we can have those difficult conversations because we're working towards the same goal. And I would say the other way that I look at that question of what does it mean to fight for your marriage, I was thinking to myself, what does it mean to be a fighter? So a fighter is somebody that has to be passionate about something, has to be committed, and sometimes they can even be emotional. And, granted, sometimes when you're having those difficult conversations, they can become emotional. And it's one of the things about being a fighter is how do you control those emotions? And I think you and I both do a great job of that. And I think at the beginning of our relationship, it was kind of difficult because I would say that you think more with your heart and are maybe more emotional. And I didn't really understand that when we were first dating, or even the first several years of our marriage. Whereas if we were having a difficult conversation, I was always trying to rationalize the argument or what you were thinking. And at times I feel like I even discounted the way you were feeling. And I can't remember exactly what you said until it just really clicked. And a lot of times this comes with, some prayer. And a lot of times we'll back off of those difficult conversations and pray about them and see where that leads. But it took me a while to realize if it was important to you or it made you feel a certain way, it was then on me to figure out and understand that those emotions and those feelings were real. And even if I don't truly understand them, they're real to you. And once I was able to come to grips with that, I think it really helped us to learn how to better fight for our marriage and fight for our relationships. Do you have anything to kind of add to that?
Well, I want to ask you, so as a guy, I feel like maybe what was so off-putting to you in the beginning was that when I would cry. Because to you, that just was like, well, that's not productive. I don't really know what to do with that. And so, but I always told Eric, I said to him, as a female, that is kind of my natural gut reaction if I really care about something or if I'm passionate about it. And while I feel like as a female in general, I don't cry maybe as much as some of my girlfriends have told me they do, or, my sister or mom or whatever the case may be. But I told Eric, when I quit crying during our arguments, or if we get really heated about something and I don't cry anymore, that's actually when you should be really worried, because then I really don't care anymore.
Yeah, and I think for me, when I saw you cry, and granted, does not happen very often. I mean, and males can definitely be emotional as well too, but when I saw you cry, that was the one thing that I didn't want you to do. I didn't want you to feel sad. I didn't want you to have those emotions where you would necessarily cry. So once again, I would then project that onto myself of, oh, what did I do wrong, to cause you to cry? And that's not productive either, And like I mentioned before, I was able to then understand your emotions and maybe why you were feeling that way. And once you're able to do that, and just be confident in your marriage. If you're confident in your marriage and your relationship, you're going to be able to get through these difficult puzzles and avenues and all the different discussions you may have. And So yeah, that's what I would say. I think, and also kind of to your point, talking about fighting for your marriage, I think it's important to fight for your marriage, because if you're not doing that, your relationships can become very complacent over time, and you get stuck in the everyday monotonous activities of getting up, going to work, helping with the kids, rinse, repeat, do it again. And if you're not truly fighting for your marriage, and I guess you could even say fighting is another like synonym for mixing it up a little bit, changing things up, keeping things interesting, trying to get out of that everyday, monotonous routine. And yeah, if you're going to be a good fighter, you have to mix it up. You have to mix up different styles. You have to mix up different techniques. And I think it's the same way in marriage as well too. You have to think about different questions to ask your spouse, different things to do, go out on a limb, try something different. And I think all of those things play a role in fighting for your marriage and fighting for your relationship.
I definitely agree. And I think that some people might even be thinking in their mind, though, like, I'm not really good at coming up with random questions, or I'm not very good about thinking outside the box. And if that's the case, I would even say Google is your friend, Like, I know sometimes before Eric, I love this. A lot of times Eric will say to me, before our date night tonight, I want you to come up with 2 questions to ask me tonight. And then he'll kind of do the same thing. And while in the beginning of our relationship, that might have been slightly out of your comfort zone to even say that or like ask me to do that, I actually really respected it, because I did view it as a way that you were looking to like switch it up or keep it interesting or fight for our marriage. So I'd say if you're like, yeah, we always go to the same restaurant. Okay, well then like go search on Yelp or on Google for different things to do in your city. I promise you there's more out there to do than what you think.
Yeah, and I think it's important to be intentional when you're fighting for your marriage and having those difficult conversations. It's important we always talk about time, place, and manner of having these discussions. And sometimes it's not always the best just to spring a difficult conversation out of the blue. Sometimes it's a good idea to prepare your spouse or whomever it may be to have that difficult conversation. Be like, hey, this is what's been on my mind. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, and, let's set aside this date night, or let's set aside this time at night when the kids are in bed, when we can discuss this and you've had time to think about it, and we can have a productive conversation. Now, granted, sometimes you can prepare all you want, and those conversations won't go the way that you want, and sometimes you have to be flexible. You have to take a step back and think about it and pray about it, and then come back together from a different angle and hash it out and fight it out some more. And I use the term fighting in a loving way. We actually don't use that term fights. We just have discussions. That's one of our jokes.
Strong discussions.
But yeah, you can't be stuck, or you can't be afraid to have those difficult conversations. And yeah, if you're not fighting for your marriage and you're complacent, I encourage you to have those difficult conversations, get outside of your comfort zone, and I promise you your marriage will be better in the long run.
I would 100% agree with that. And I also think that, Eric, it's really interesting to me how far you and I have come in our discussions, because you in general are an internal processor. Would you agree with that still?
Fact.
And I am an external processor. So I think a lot of times Eric has to wade through a lot of words with me to figure out what I'm actually trying to say, which is probably exhausting for you and your personality type.
Yeah, I would definitely say sometimes I overanalyze exactly what you're saying, because, and this is just how I think, is that I'm thinking about each specific word or each specific phrase, and sometimes that can get inside of my own head as well too, and I just need to take it for what it is and not overthink it, basically.
Sure, but then one thing that I have come to respect so much about Eric, but it is also outside my comfort zone, is sometimes he'll say, I appreciate you bringing that to me, but if I respond right now, I'm probably going to say some things that I regret. So I would appreciate the time to sleep on that. And I think in the beginning of our marriage, that almost like killed me on the inside. Like, to me, I'm like, I just want to hash it out and like get through the emotions and like move on. But that's not mature.
That's true, which I think sometimes it is good. And, you always hear the general rule of thumb, don't go to bed angry. I think there's a fine line between going to bed angry and going to bed in a state of contentment, and even though you might not have everything resolved, at least the topic has been brought up. You're able to think about it, and hopefully you're not going to bed angry. You can be frustrated at times, most definitely, because as a man, as a male, and other people, but we want to get things resolved as quickly as possible. But you know what? Your marriage is one of those things that is so important that if it's not resolved in one conversation or two conversations or 3 or 4 or 5, it could take years to resolve some of those conversations. But you have to be patient, continue to fight, and sometimes it's a 12-round, 12-month, 24-month fight discussion, but it's going to be worth it.
Absolutely. And I think that's also such a picture of what God designed marriage to be, where, Christ and the church, he always fights for us. We can wander and, go astray, but he's always going to win us back to him if we're truly believers. And we always want our marriage to point to Christ, no matter, what the case may be. So anyway, Eric, that was a really, really great question. I appreciate you bringing that.
You're right. That was a great question.
You're like, dang, I should pat myself on the back.
Let's go.
Oh, me. Always so fun to have you here. And I know, Eric, you truly are just becoming such a favorite part of the podcast you're already my favorite part, but you're becoming the listeners too. So we appreciate you beauties tuning in and being here. Y'all do us a favor and hop on over to @HealthyWithHeatherBrown on Instagram and shoot me a DM and let me know how we can be praying for your marriage this week. We would be honored to. All right. Talk to you next time. Hey girl, hey! If you're loving the show, I would love to hear from you. Please be sure to go on over to your podcast app, scroll down to where it says ratings and reviews, and tell me your thoughts. It really does mean so much. Your words might just be what the next person needs to tune in and start living a healthier life from the inside out. Thanks!